Good morning, everybody, and welcome. It's great to see so many of you joining us here today for the Event Greening Forum webinar. Today's webinar is titled Beyond the Booth, a life cycle approach to sustainable event materials. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is John Aravanitakis, and I am the chairperson of the Event Greening Forum. It's really a great privilege for me to be here today hosting this session with all of you this morning. At the Event Greening Forum, we're all about driving meaningful change in South Africa's events industry. We help organizers, suppliers, and brands think differently about how we design, deliver, and measure the impact of our events. And today's discussion couldn't be more relevant. Because when talking about sustainability, it's not just about what looks good on the day, it's about what happens before the event, how materials are sourced, designed, and manufactured, and what happens after the event, how they are reused, repurposed, or recycled, the three R's of sustainability as we know them. That's the essence of going beyond the booth. It's about taking a full life cycle from cradle to grave approach to the materials and the mindset we bring to our events and exhibitions. And to explore this topic today, we've got two absolute experts with us, both of whom live and breathe sustainability in really practical and inspiring ways. First up, we've got Steve Lister joining us from overseas, a global sustainability consultant who has spent more than 25 years helping some of the world's biggest brands, the likes of Unilever, Coca-Cola, Heineken, L'Oreal, and Nike, transform how they show up in the retail and event spaces. Steve has this incredible ability to merge creativity, commercial sense, and environmental responsibility, and he's going to share how using sustainable materials with a sustainable mindset can create real value for clients and brands alike. After Steve, we're going to be joined by an industry expert that you're all very familiar with, Gary van der Walt, sustainable design and implementation consultant at Zenita's events and exhibitions. Many of you will know Gary's work. He's been a driving force behind greener stand design in South Africa for over 14 years. Today, he's going to walk us through a really practical framework for evaluating materials. He's going to share real examples of greener solutions being used locally and unpack what a truly sustainable and transparent supply chain looks like. It's really going to be a great, insightful hour, and I ask you to stay with us, and I encourage you all to get involved. Pop up your questions and comments in the chat as we go along, and we'll make sure at the end to have a Q&A session for those of you who want to ask your questions live. So once again, thank you everybody for joining us this morning. It's always amazing to see such engaged community of event professionals coming together to share ideas and keep pushing our industry forward. So without any further ado, Steve, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, John, and thank you very much for the invite today. It's a topic very close to my heart, and one which you say I've been working on and been passionate about for the last 25 years. Now, I must say, over the last 25 years, not all of those years have been positive about sustainability. Sustainability has definitely been a journey, and I'm a realist when it comes to sustainability here. So what I wanted to sort of like just say here is just another quick introduction of myself. I've been working with global brands and retailers to really look at their sustainability within their global print marketing, with their events, and within their retail spaces. So all areas of when it comes to sort of like projecting that brand and what they want to take to market. I'm also a member of Popeye, or Shop, you might know it down in South Africa as Shop. Now, I've got to just say as well, for full transparency, I've just come back from Cape Town. I've just spent an incredible week down there with Gary and the Zenita team. And I've been taking a really deep dive into looking at how they make their materials, the production, and go a little bit deeper into sort of like design, materials, and end of life and circularity. So I had a really good perspective on the South African market last week. So just to say thanks, Gary, for hosting me and that for last week as well. So yeah, broad experience within the industry. I'm also a shop judge globally, so I judge a lot of the awards. I do South Africa. I've also do Australasia, Europe, and Americas as well. So I see the good, I see the bad, and I sometimes see a lot of these ugly displays that come out and people do. So hopefully I can bring that experience to you today. If you've got any questions, burning questions that you've had for years and you've just wanted to ask someone a question, that's what we're here for today as well. So thank you for inviting me today, and I'm looking forward to bringing that experience to you and guiding you through what can sometimes seem as a really complex subject, but hopefully myself and Gary and the questions we can simplify it for you and help you on your sustainability journey.
Thanks, Steve. I just want to congratulate Steve. It's we just saw this morning he's been nominated the top 100 retail technology influencers. So well done on that. It's your
Gary.
years that you've spent in the industry and moving across to sustainability is paying off as becoming an influencer in that space.
Always nice to get an accolade for 25 years worth of hard graft.
Yeah, it's worth it. I'm just going to share my screen. If you just confirm for me that it's up there.
Yep, can see it, Jack, Gary.
Okay. So I just want to take everyone through a very basic idea of what the subject matter is. You've all seen the marketing info before. So we're looking at a life cycle approach to sustainable events. I think the important factors in this is identifying the materials that we're looking at. A lot of people look at a hall full of materials and don't actually know what they're looking at. And then a couple of case studies, what is life cycle thinking, and then the most important part, I think, of today is to get into interactive discussion. We've got a lot of different people from different sectors in the industry. I can see that there's also a number of countries. We've got people from Sweden, guys from up in Africa. We're great to see such a sector of people that have joined. So what we're typically looking at, if we look at materials in an expo site, this is really just at a breakdown, and I've mainly concentrated here on something which would not be sustainable. These are picks from global, so there's nothing specific about it. Closer to home, we are looking at waste as a problem, where landfills are becoming full. And I think this is actually a global issue. We don't know where to go with the waste anymore.
Yeah. No, Gary, you're right. Just quickly on that slide, just to add a bit of context. I saw a report the other day that 75% of all materials used within events and expos are virgin materials.
Yeah.
That's a big number.
Yeah, yeah.
75% of all materials are virgin. So that's going to have to change because you've only got to look at what you're showing there as an image, what's on the floor there. That's a standard
Yeah.
expo exhibition that's going on every day in every country, in every exhibition center in the world every day. So, you know, things will have to change at some point, and we'll touch on that a little bit later when it comes to what's driving these changes.
I think what you're saying is true. That's a global issue. We sometimes wonder if it's just in our own environment, but it is truly something global. The materials also global. You know, we've got plastics, MDF, chipboard, polyester. These are items or materials that have been around for years. We all know them and understand them. I think that's partly part of the problem is that we know the materials well, so it's very easy to work in it, very easy to design in it. And with change, we have to understand that change actually includes change across the whole scope of work, how we design, what we do, how we implement. But it doesn't change the people and the businesses stay where they are in the scope, in the industry. It's just moving slightly across your shift into a different way of working and a more positive way of working. Just to put the global perspective quickly, this is a slide from Informa. They started the Better Stands program. It's a typical event in the UK, a lot bigger than what we do here. But in terms, 454 mid-sized cars, which is waste. I'll share the slides afterwards if people want to have a look. Where the waste lays, you know, carpet, venue waste, signage, sign space only, flooring. And then the biggest problem that we have is disposable exhibitor stands. So just to give it some sort of context. And Steve was saying now it's global, it's part of the event's DNA.
It is. Unfortunately, we're saddled by history, Gary. You know, everybody makes the same things all the time because they feel comfortable using the same materials, and that's not a bad thing either. So, you know, I'm not going to criticize any event manufacturer, for what they do. It's just an education process, and it's very difficult to move away from materials sometimes. You've got to take a risk. You've got to change material. Is it going to be the same? Is the client going to like it? Will it fail? So there's a lot of things to think about, and I'm massively on the side of the event manufacturers here, guys. I understand it's a very complex
Mm,
world, manufacturing stands.
mm. And it's all about, we only know what we know. So a lot of times people are working in a space where they haven't got exposure to anything else, and we don't really understand what the problem is and how it affects us, and is it even really important to us?
Yeah, yeah.
So just to identify materials and how you would typically put it into a linear or a circular type environment. This is generalization. There's different scopes in different regions. You might find a region that for instance can't recycle glass, or where there's issues of getting certain products. We see a lot of sustainable products. I'll show you some of them later on that are sustainable by nature, but just because of the fact that you cannot scale it, they're not really practical. So traditionally, linear models are heavy on logistics, demand high staff, sometimes toxic. There's inevitably dust and dirt when you're on site, and then it's all technology. A linear process, just a little image at the bottom to show what the linear process is. And then just the other side of the coin is when you're looking at materials which are recyclable, inevitably they fit into a circular economy. John was speaking earlier about cradle to grave, and I think where we want to go inevitably will be cradle to cradle. Cradle to grave, if you are able to have something that's compostable, recyclable, and get into a circular environment, that's great. But if you can go actually full circular economy is where we are aiming to get to.
Gary, sorry to interrupt. I see
Yes.
Doug had his hands up. I'm not sure, and
Yeah.
he's put in the screen that he's only seeing the desktop. Okay, he's typed in here now. Don't stress. He sorted it out. Sorry to interrupt. Thanks. We can carry on.
No worries. When we're looking at materials, typically the easiest way to do it, it sounds complicated, but just to get to what is recyclable, what is sustainable, is to do a life cycle assessment. This is something that we can do on a desktop, on a piece of paper. Doesn't have to be complicated. Later, when you get into it, you can do something that's more advanced, having carbon footprint calculators and that type of thing. Essentially, this is what it's about. Where's the raw material? Where's it extracted from? What's its source? What does it consist of? Then manufacturing. How is it manufactured? Is there high energy use? What's the waste generated from it? Where does the waste product go to? And so on. Logistics. Is it a heavy product? Is it lightweight? Then the user phase. Energy consumption in actually using a product. Is it reused? I think that's a big focus that's in our industry at the moment when we're looking at programs like Better Stands. The reuse factor has come in as something very important. It is a key factor, but at the end of the day, the materials will define what's the actual value of what we're achieving. We can achieve sustainability at different levels. So you might be an entry level and you might be a top end level. And it's about positioning yourself in that. And the end of the life cycle assessment, you've got the end of life analysis. So in a very simplistic way, if you're doing a scribble on a piece of paper, you look at what's your goals, what scope are you aiming at? Is it your direct emissions, or is it emissions of a service provider, or is it emissions of a client at the end of the day? The life cycle analysis is how many times are you use the stand, what's it's made of, where's it going to go to? And then you do like an impact assessment at the end. Were there a lot of emissions? What went to waste? What didn't? And then it's up to us to really interpret those facts ourselves and make a logical assessment and say, this is where I am with my material. Should I be looking for something different? Is there a way to improve on what I am doing? Just a couple of materials quickly. Traditionally, MDF. On the side, we've got paper, fiberboard. You'll see the items that are put in gray. Organic hemp. It's very, very sustainable. Whether it's something that we can use effectively in our environment is very doubtful. Items like bamboo, also very sustainable. when it comes to being practical, where does it fit into? So possibly things like floors and that kind of thing. There is technology where they're making fabric out of it, but there's challenges with things like printing. So in your little assessment that you do, it is up to you or us to really look at what we're doing, what is viable, what is scalable. I'll always come back to the word scalable. If we cannot take something and scale it into a bigger impact, then we're seriously actually just wasting our time. So whether your life cycle assessment is good or bad will tell you what your product is and where the material is. Just a quick case study. Obviously, I'm from Zanita. That's our foundation material that we base our sustainability on. It's a repulpable closed cell. It's a fiberboard. It's lightweight. It's strong. We've got 0 VOCs. We've got FSC rating. And we're also an eco-choice rated material. Gives us a very strong foundation in our environment, whether it be retail, events, exhibitions. We even are in the agricultural environment. And we still weigh up where we put it into an environment. Is it going to be the most viable product? You'll see Steve shaking his head. He sees a lot of the retail sector where people put in products which are sustainable, but the way that it is put in actually makes it not the most viable product. So we have to be open to be critical of what we're doing as well.
Yep.
And then we've got the Event Greening Forum, which is our industry response locally. And then globally, I think we all have heard of the net zero carbon events that has also now generated better stands, good places to go look for information and to link up with other communities that are sharing that information. So event managers, it's all up to us, how we influence our environment, how we influence the people around us, our suppliers, our venues, and also to be self-critical, I think, because we're not always sustainable. Steve and I were chatting last week about things like solar, electric cars, things like that, where there are big question marks around what is sustainable and what's not. And I think we will be looking at our own industry moving forward with the same critical eye.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap from our side.
And that's brilliant, Gary. And I think that gives everyone a really nice introduction. And I think you show there some of the very complex things that today, as all of you who have joined today, and thank you for joining, is you face this every single day. You look at design, you then look at how you're going to design it. You then have a choice to make about the materials, and I'll just touch on that and I'll follow up on what Gary said. But then you then have lots of different processes to follow afterwards. You've then got to look at how are you going to then manufacture it. Are you going to take a great material and make it unrecyclable? Are you going to stick things on it? You're going to drill things on it? You're going to glue things together? If you do all of those things I've just said there's only one place it's going to go. It's going to probably end up in landfill. At worst and at best, it's probably going to be burnt or incinerated. So you've got this process really of a 7-step process, which you have to look at, and it all starts with design. And I want to give you another big statistic for you to remember. 80% of the sustainability impact of any booth or exhibition or expo is determined. So that's 80% of the sustainability impact is determined at the early design stage. Now, if you get it wrong at the beginning, you'll never be able to recover it. It's simple as that. The choices you make at the beginning are fundamental to all the steps that happen afterwards. So great design is where it all starts. It flows through to materials. If you then get that right, it then flows through to manufacturing. How are you going to manufacture it? But there's some other key things afterwards that you've really, really got to think about. So you've got to think about how you then package it. How are you going to transport it? Because what you don't want to do is make this fantastic stand or booth or whatever you're going to do, display, and then wrap it in plastic or bubble wrap. Now, I do appreciate you have to protect it. Don't get me wrong. I know you have to do that. And then you've got then you've got to look at things like shipping. How are you going to ship it? Shipping and production is a really high percentage of the CO2 impact, the carbon impact of an event. And then you've then got to look at, like Gary said, at breakdown. is if you've made a booth or a display or whatever you're making for an event, is if you've made it out of the wrong material and you've designed it wrong and made it out of the wrong material, you've got no chance when it comes to recycling at the end. So it's going to be very, very difficult for you. But I wanted to simplify what Gary said about materials, because we can go a deep dive. If you want to go a deep dive on materials, that's my background as well. My background is on materials. But I want you to just, if you can just take away from today the simplified materials. There's only 3 key materials in the world. There's only 3. So you should probably just write this down or make a note in your phone. But there's 3 types. 1, there's grown materials. So these are grown materials that are derived from agricultural, forestry, or natural products. Papers, fibers, bamboo, all those sorts of natural materials are what's called, number 1, grown materials. Number 2, mined materials. And those materials are based on materials that are mined or extracted from the earth. And they're going to be your metals, your aluminiums, the structures that you might use within booths, within displays. And then finally, you've got petrochemical materials. These are derived from petrochemical, from oil-based fossil fuels and gases. So they're your plastics, they're your foam boards at that end. And if I just want to take on the 1, 2, 3 again, 1, grown materials, very easy to recycle. You can put them back in again and again and again. Mined materials, metals. Hey, steel, aluminium, one of the most recyclable products in the world ever. Give you another statistic. 97% of all steel that's ever been produced ever in the world is still in existence. So 1 and 2, dead easy. Petrochemical materials, plastics, complex plastics, PVCs, polypropylenes, high impact polystyrenes, acrylics, they are very difficult to recycle. So wherever you can, really think about the materials you're going to use as in that 1, 2, 3, grown, mined, petrochemical. I think it will really help you simplify your material choices in the future. And by the way, I could talk for hours about this, by the way, guys.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, once we get to that point, we know which materials are fundamentally the best to use. Then obviously we get to the design phase and figuring out how we get stuff to site, how we reuse it, how do we make it economically viable for us to actually be in the exhibition environment, the events environment, which is dear to all of us.
And Gary, I get asked all the time. I get asked all the time about, well, being sustainable is more expensive, or I have to pay more for it. Can I just say to everyone on here today, that is a myth. That is one of the biggest myths there is in the marketplace. You can juggle 3 things. You can juggle cost, you can juggle functionality and design, and you can juggle sustainability. You can have all 3 in your displays and in your events and your expos. They're not mutually exclusive. I know loads of people who have done displays, shop fitting, expos out of sustainable materials, which 1, look better, 2, are cheaper, 2, are easier to recycle at the end, and they make more profit. And let's not get away from this 4th one here. It's not a dirty word for us to use profitability and sustainability. They actually are mutually, should be together. If you're profitable, you're a more sustainable company. If you're more sustainable, you can employ more people, you can win more work, you've got more longevity of life. So don't think sustainability is more expensive, and don't think it's more profitable. I know a lot of companies who are extremely profitable and they're extremely sustainable, and they like to keep that as their own little secret because they don't want everyone to be doing it. But believe me, you can do it if you get all of those elements that Gary said, together with this sort of like looking at this whole holistic, circularity of design all the way through to breakdown at the end of a show.
So I see a lot of familiar faces, names, a couple of new ones, and we'd really like to encourage questions to come through and get some sort of dialogue going, maybe some competitive views on what we're doing, because I think that's the the key to the discussion to getting to a point where we actually understand where we are. And the Event Greening Forum's mission is part of that education process and sharing information. So I see a lot of knowledgeable people in the group, and yeah, let's hear from you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gary.
Go.
Sorry, Steve.
No, I was going to say it's always difficult to ask questions in these forums, but come on, everyone, be brave and ask the questions, because this is your chance to ask, difficult questions. I love being challenged, about either what I know, what I don't know, and if I don't know anything, I'll make sure I get it back to you as well.
Thank you. Absolutely. I agree with you. A lot of people are sometimes shy to ask questions, and it always just takes one or two brave souls to stick their hands up. So for those of you who would like to be those brave souls, then stick your hands up. We gladly take your questions. And an opportunity, having Steve all the way from the UK here with us, it's not often we get international speakers of the caliber of Steve. Congratulations again, Steve, on your nomination. We wish you best of luck in being the actual winner at the end of the day.
Well, just to blow my own trumpet for a second, I actually found out this morning, first thing this morning, I was actually named in the top 100. So it was actually announced this morning that I was been named in the top 100 retail influencers in the world. So hey,
fantastic! Wow, well, that's a great achievement. Congratulations on that. One of the questions, and maybe I'll kick it off, always willing to set the cat amongst the pigeons, so to speak. Gary, one of the questions that often come to mind is where Zenita is recognized, and as you say, you've got all those accreditations and accolades in terms of the Zenita product, which is absolutely fantastic. And as you know, I'm a great fan and supporter of Zenita. The question that's come to mind a few times when I've discussed it with people is the actual printing and encapsulating of the Zenita product when it's actually printed on. How sustainable is the actual material once it's no longer craft and it's now been printed and laminated? Because I believe it's been said, and again, I'm having you here as the expert, that once it's been printed, it no longer is 100% certified as a sustainable product, and it's only the craft version that is cradle to grave, so to speak. I mean, over to you.
Yeah, I think anyone that's in the print industry will be able to tell you that the print industry has moved mountains to become more sustainable. If you went back 20 years, you had walked into a print room and you would smell immediately, here's something going on with solvents and inks and the way that inks were applied. It's moved on leaps and bounds. So mostly it's water-based, UV dried inks. So the sustainable factor once the board's printed is negligible. There's no real change in where the board's going. If it goes into the waste environment, where inevitably the process is they'll put it into water, everything will be dissolved, and then the pulp separated from everything else. The inks are literally good enough to drink. I wouldn't go around drinking gallons of it, but it wouldn't kill you. So yeah, the short answer is no. And if you're looking at things like latex, and then Steve he works extensively with HP, and he'll tell you that they've gone to huge strides to make it as sustainable as possible. And every year we see new technology. If you go to events like FESPA, where people are growing leaps and bounds.
I'm super impressed with the Expo guys. And look, there's how many people in the Expo guys room there?
Yeah, there are quite a few there. Liam, Patrick and his team.
Yeah, super impressed. Look, there's loads. Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. That's one of the biggest myths in our industry, that when you print on something or you laminate it, it becomes unrecyclable or it's unsustainable. That is rubbish. That's a complete myth. Now, let me make sure this is right. So, by printing on it, you're not going to harm it. It's such a small micron of ink to do the overall substrate that will just get taken out in the pulping process and the repulping. It's called de-inking, and they actually will de-ink it, and the ink will be stripped off once it's pulped back into a product. Single lamination is okay as well. So single lamination is okay. And to explain it for you is, if you put a layer of lamination here on top of a board, as long as the water can get in at the back and strip the fibers off, you're okay. Now, if you take a single sheet of paper and you double laminate it, that you can't do anything with that. You won't be able to strip it off. Now, if you then take, now this is an interesting one. If you take, and I'm not promoting Zanita here, I'm just going to take Zanita as an example, because I think you can all get it, is if you take a Zanita board, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 mil thick, and you laminate both sides, that's all right, because the water can get in the inside as well. So it's like it can be separated and stripped back. So just remember that if you encapsulate something completely, you're going to make it unrecyclable. Single lamination is fine. Printing is fine.
Okay. And Gary, then in terms of, I mean, I understand from Stephen, and how many are there printers in South Africa that are starting to make, are there more printers around that are starting to make use of the types of inks that you are talking about, and the encapsulating methods that Steve was talking about?
And yeah, it's
'Cause I know,
actually the print and the ink is across the whole industry.
Yeah.
So whether you're printing
Okay.
onto any sort of substrate, it's pretty much the inks are what they are. We use the same ink onto our board, which would go onto uh, a material like, say, Corex or Forex. The material is not sustainable, but the ink is. So I think that side of the industry is pretty safe.
Yeah.
There are some processes that are still in the process that they're not that sustainable. But there's very few full solvent-based processes that you'll still find in the whole print industry.
so I think from that, it's important for you when if you are going to be working with a fiber board or something along those similar lines, and any printing for that matter, is to ask your printers that you're getting the printing done, what type of inks they're using, etc.
Yeah.
So I see we've got a couple of hands up, so it's great. The conversation is starting, and then there's also a question in the chat group, which I'll ask after. But Expo guys had their hands up first, so let's ask them to ask their question. Over to you, Patrick, or whoever from Expo guys.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you're well. Jasmine from Expo Guys here. And my question would be, how do we create a greater pull with the organizers towards sustainability with the events that they host?
So do you say it was Yasmin?
Yes.
Yasmin, great question. That is because that's where it starts. You've got to start having that uncomfortable conversation, because what you've got to think is you might go and speak to the event organizer, and I'm going to be really honest with you guys here. I'm not going to hide anything here. You might go and speak to an event organizer and they don't care about sustainability. So I'm a realist. I've done this for 20 odd years, and I know that I can go into a meeting and some people can look me straight in the eye and go, Steve, yeah, nice to think about it, but I'm not really concerned about that. I want it to look good and I want it to cost a certain amount. But the thing is you as a team, so let's just take you, because Yasmin, you've asked a question. You've got to set your stall out to say, right, I've got to be prepared to have the conversation to take them on the journey of being sustainable. Or if they don't want to go there, well, you've got to make a decision. Do you deal with them? Well, you're not going to lose business. You're not going to not do it. But I think you just, as a company, you just need to have the conversation, open it up. How do you want this exhibition to be? Do you want it to be more sustainable? Can we look at increasing your, sustainability of the booths and the whole event? And I think if you open that first question, you will, and I can guarantee this, Yasmin, you will get really uncomfortable questions sometimes, and you will feel uncomfortable because they'll ask you questions that you don't know. But the great thing is, the more you ask, the more you live it, the more questions that you will be able to answer, and you'll be very surprised how quickly you will become a sustainability expo expert, because you've got to live it and you've got to breathe it. You've got to be confident. Hey, I don't know what you guys do, but I'm sure you're fantastic at what you do. You just need to now create maybe a portfolio of alternative materials. You need to understand what materials you can swap out. If you're not going to use MDF, can you use Zenita fiberboard? If you're not going to use PVC foam boards, I've got some other fiber boards I can use. or non-plastic.
Mm.
So just go in there, be confident, have the conversations, but just be prepared that sometimes you might feel a little bit uncomfortable because they might challenge you or they might not even care.
Mm.
Yeah, that's the
Stephen,
thing.
also,
Gary?
yeah, I think everyone that's on this session is here because they are looking for sustainability.
Yeah.
And we get into those spaces where you're speaking to an organizer that says, I don't really care. Inevitably, it's about they don't really know what they're talking about either. They've got a very small view of what sustainability is. They believe it's a tree hugger, maybe
Yeah.
a thing. And once we know what the full life cycle assessment is of something, it's a lot easier to talk about it.
Yeah.
So if we understand where our products come from, where it's going to, what it's going to do on site, very easy to engage with those conversations, with those tricky questions. I mean, John raised the question now, the print on the board makes it less sustainable. If that's a perception that someone's got before you start the conversation, you're almost wasting your time to even start speaking about sustainability. But once you get the
Yeah.
facts there, it becomes a lot easier. So this education process that we're going down, I think it's been a big focus of Event Greening Forum. You've got the net zero carbon events also doing a lot of education. Absorb as much as what you can and put it into practice. And where you don't know, ask questions from people that do know.
Yeah.
And that's why I invite some, people like Steve onto the calls because they've got a bigger overview than sometimes we have.
So go back to what Yasmin's question was what you might have there is you might want to tackle it in a different way. I'm not a salesman, okay, but I could at least go to an events company and go, okay, do you want to reduce your waste? Do you want to pay less for your waste at the end of the waste management of an event? Everyone's going to want to pay less because they're going to have to get rid of the waste at the end. If it's complicated, if it's expensive, they're going to have to get rid of it. Not everybody takes all of their waste away. So you might not start with sustainability, but you could maybe look at a driver that says, well, actually, I can help reduce your costs of this event. And then all of a sudden, sustainability can be built backwards. It doesn't always have to be led from the front. Hey, how many times have we all been at breakdown, guys? And we've been at the breakdown of an exhibition, and there is just tons of waste, and that all has to be paid for to get rid of. Someone's got to pay for it. Now, if you're looking at saying, well, instead of 75% of your waste going into landfill, of which you'll have to pay, I can recycle 75% of it, and I can get a value for it. Now you're going to start saving people money. If you save people money, they'll want to listen.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, it's all about, as you said earlier on, Steve, there's that profit element that people need to look after when hosting an exhibition. Then we see your question. We'll answer in a moment. We'll give you the opportunity to ask it in a moment. One of the things that one can always look at is listen for the objection. So when you are presenting to your potential client, to the organizers, try and get an understanding of what is the actual reason for the objection, or what are they saying when they're objecting to the sustainability, because it may be just something very simple. Like as Steve just mentioned, or Gary and I spoke about, is that they might just be concerned about an element that they don't really know much about. And by you engaging with them and giving them the right answers and learning from them, it might open their eyes up and realize, hang on a minute, we actually didn't realize it from that perspective. So you need to start the conversation. I think, like anything, if you don't make a start, you don't open the conversation, it's going to go nowhere. Yes, Steve.
You're right, and I'm going to stick by this with what I said to Yasmin. Is you'll be surprised how quickly you can become their sustainability expert for events. You'll be really surprised how quickly they will then rely on you. They will call you. They will speak to you, and then all of a sudden you've got a very deeper relationship with that events organizer. And then you might win more events. You might get invited back more. You might win more business. You'll be very surprised at how quickly you will become a sustainability expo expert.
Absolutely. And then, I mean, on the other note, one can also look at the fact that, also explain to them the benefits from a public perception and a PR perspective that they may not necessarily get if they weren't doing it. By now position themselves as in a more sustainable way, they can bag that on their PR, and that will be used promoting their actual expo or the event
Yeah.
in a better way to the general public and giving them more exposure. So they'll be benefiting from a PR point of view. And generally, papers and radio stations and those kind of things may just pick up on the fact that, hang on a minute, this is something interesting to talk about, and give them better
Yeah.
exposure and media exposure. So there are unseen practical examples of where this can then become a beneficial element for them. So those are the kind of things one needs to sit and do when you're being a salesperson to your potential client, is saying, yes, if you're objecting to the cost, but hang on a minute, we can, as Steve said, save you money at the end of the expo, because you're not going to have to hire tons of skips and get rid of that, because it's usually done by weight. And then also, the publicity that you can create by telling everybody that, hang on a minute, this stand was done in a sustainable way, and it benefits the company in the longer run.
It's interesting you bring up cost. I've just looked at the chat, and Muno has asked a question about costs and said, what can we do about costs? Right, I'm going to give you some inside information here. So in the UK, for Popeye, the Point of Purchase Association, you might know them as SHOP, South Africa. We wanted to debunk this myth about sustainable materials are more expensive. So I went to the marketplace and I sent out an anonymous list of 10 materials for an event or a display. Self-adhesive materials, foam boards, MDF. I took all the traditional materials down this side, and I asked the 3 biggest material distributors in the UK to put their prices there. And then I put an alternative next to it, a sustainable alternative. So PVC over to, I don't know, a polypropylene, foam board over to a fiber board, MDF over to again, like a fiber based or a fiber board. I did it for 10 of the top materials. We did it anonymously. I signed a contract of confidentiality because I wanted to debunk the myth that sustainable materials are more expensive. 80% of the materials that came back, the sustainable materials were the same price or cheaper. Simple as that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you're looking for materials, you've got to speak to your suppliers. Do them a deal. Say to them, what about volumes? What prices have you got? If I swap my volumes from one material to another material, can you match the price of the old material? Give me 3 months to build my volumes up, or 6 months to build my volumes up. They want to do that. They will want to do that too. So the myth of it's more expensive, it is a myth. However, being a realist, I do know certain companies around the world will charge more for a sustainable product. I don't know why they would even do that personally, but do you know what? If you make it at price parity, dead easy change. Swap it out tomorrow. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Fantastic, Steve. I don't want to miss out. Lynn's had her hand up for some time now. Lynn?
Good morning, everybody. Yes, thanks, Gary, Steve, John, and Lynn for this seminar. Awesome. Sustainability is very close to my heart. I think my question is more for Gary. I'm just interested to know about the South African market and the growth since sort of COVID, to see how many people, how the organizers are being receptive to it. I personally did Cape Wine with Gary, remember 12 years ago, and it was just, the whole show was Zanita. I've used the Zanita product for clients and they just go, wow. You cannot tell it's recyclable cardboard. And if you sell it to them, well, you can reuse it like 14 times. It's an amazing product, but I just don't think in South Africa we're being as receptive as potentially the European market. Just to share, the benefits during build-up. I did one with Zanita, and in 3 hours the whole event was up, and I was like, wow, what do I do next? Do I go for lunch? Just the build-up time was amazing, So Gary, I'm just interested to know a bit more about that South African market. What percentage of people do you think is using recyclable, sustainable products as opposed to custom and shell scheme? I'm just interested to know if you've got any knowledge on the South African market and where we're going. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Very good question there. And also just quickly on the price issue. Exactly to your point, if the build-up time is a lot quicker using a sustainable product as a fiberboard or something, I don't want to mention any particular names, but because we're not seen as the EGF, we need to be independent and not seen as supporting any one product or the other. But if you're using like a fiberboard, you're also going to reduce, perhaps, as Lynn said, the build-up period. So therefore, you may save a whole day that the organizer would normally pay for a build-up, and there's your cost coming down from the venue. So Gary.
Yeah, I think it is a wider answer than what the question is, because it does come back to looking at the full life cycle, not only of the material, but of your event and what you're doing, where you're doing it, how you're doing it. So a lot of it comes into it is like, what are the logistics? What's the build-up time? If you're doing something like a Sun City build versus working at Nasrec, there are different components of the build that come into question, which you need to analyze as a company or a group, and then decide what is the most sustainable. I've actually done events sometimes where I've said to guys, don't use an heater. It's not for you. In this specific case, there is a better solution. And then looking at the markets themselves, I don't think we sometimes think we're in this isolated space where we are changing differently to the rest of the world. The only real difference is that in the UK and Europe, for instance, there's a lot more legislation. People are getting value back from things like waste. I do know that, speaking to CTICC as an example, there was an event where the organizer was charged 140,000 Rand to remove their waste from site. We did a similar sized event a month or two back. We did Winex again, 4,000 square meters of space. Very little waste, compared to the other event. So those factors come into play. The uptake in South Africa, I think, towards sustainability has been slower. I don't think it's a factor that people don't want to. There's different things at play. There's the economy that we have to look at. Steve says we have to be realists. Changing things for organizers sometimes difficult, because they have to stay viable. It then comes to looking at things in bigger pictures. So if we're looking at where we're going to be in 5 years' time, are we going to use this material again? Can we apply it differently? Can we use staff in other areas that don't need tools to build things, so we don't have to ship people around the country or into Africa or wherever it might be? Then your sustainability starts to become a different picture. You can have a look at the slides. I can share them later again. If you're looking at a linear model, which 90% of us are working in just out of being forced into it most of the time, it's very difficult to make a sustainable product work. The minute you start thinking circularity, it becomes a lot easier. Then it's very easy to implement. And it's sort of like, when you get it, and then it's easy to run. So to come back to Lynn, there is an adoption in South Africa. We're seeing more and more events. We're seeing conferences being done really quickly. They need a 4-hour load instead of a 4-day. Quick load out, reuse of the product. We've got stands that we did for companies like Microsoft that are now being used 25 times. It was unheard of 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because we were still very much in the use it and dump it environment. If I say to an organizer, you can reuse this, they said, why? Where am I going to use it? Now, when they're thinking ahead 2 or 3 years, they're saying, I could use this for the next 3 years, one investment, and then off I go. You don't lose anything as a service provider, because the opportunity just becomes bigger. The budgets don't disappear. The companies grow. So it's a self-feeding animal at the end of the day. And the more sustainable you are, the more we can actually grow our industry. Can
I just add one thing? Lynn, you asked a question about South Africa. Okay. Why did I come to Cape Town last week? There was only one reason, and that was, I believe I've never seen a whole expo, 450 booths at Cape Expo, Cape Wine, done in one material. So I could actually say, and be bold enough to say, that actually South Africa is leading the way on sustainable exhibitions and expos. So I had to come and see it for myself, because I'd never seen it before. So I'm going to take that message back around the world and say to people, actually, I saw something in Cape Town which I'd never seen before. The build-up was
And
quick,
that's the
materials
problem.
were mono, and that. So to answer your question, are you a sustainable? Is it sustainable? Well, more than most. I've never seen it anywhere else in the world.
And that's an incredible accolade for South Africa, because we often our worst enemies, because we think that we actually behind globally, and we're always looking at global people to give us inspiration. And here we are inspiring a global company, and it's come straight out of Steve's mouth. It's not something that we've asked him to say or promote. So we also as South Africans need to give ourselves a little bit more credit for what we're doing and where
Oh, you
we
have
are
to.
doing
If you
things.
want to look, if you want to go and look at a really bad country and a really wasteful country, you've only got to look at the US. I mean, they don't care. They really do not care, you know. But the movement changes when, like Gary said, you get one event does it, then it feeds to another event. You get a client, and then that client ask you not to do one expo, they ask you to do one expo and a conference, and then a conference leads to a management meeting, and then all of a sudden it sort of self feeds itself out. So all countries are at different levels, and I joke about the US. The US is slightly behind. Believe it or not, China and the Far East, they're ahead. That you would think of China being, China are leading the way when it comes to a lot of sustainability, especially around, displays and stuff as well. So everyone's at different journey paths. Don't beat yourself up, guys. You are definitely not at at the back of the pack. You know, I'm going to be banging the big drum about South Africa expos are sustainable on my journeys.
Thank you, Steve. That'll be incredible. As I said, we also need to look at ourselves and give ourselves credit for where we are. We're not where we need to be, of course, but it's baby steps. We're getting there, and giving ourselves credit. As I said, sometimes South Africans, we are our worst enemies when we think about our where we are as a nation and also in our industry. I know one of the questions that have also come out is, obviously there's a lot of existing companies with a lot of investments in existing elements and things like that. So the change may not be able to be made as quick, because you can't like throw away years and years of collecting existing type of materials. But like you said, Gary and Steve, some of the second the mined materials, they can still be used, and then start slowly as they're ending their useful life, start replacing it with something more, or otherwise combining the two,
Absolutely.
like your stage one and your stage two materials.
Yeah, you've got to run your business. Guys, you've got to run your business, and you've got to be profitable, and you've got to look after everybody, and that's it. Simple as that. So I'm not going to tell everyone to change to everything tomorrow because they can't afford it. You've got investments in different technologies. Just start your journey. The worst thing you can do is not do anything. That's the worst thing you can do, right?
Absolutely.
Just take that first step. Get the first boards in, trial them, print them, cut them, and then look at them and look at those things and just say, the worst thing. If I come back in a year's time and there's people on here who've done nothing, I will say to you
You,
guys,
you
what a wasted experience. No, it's just a wasted journey. You guys
yeah.
don't forget as well is you guys are experts in your field. You're experts at making things. You're experts at stuff like that. So definitely think of yourselves as experts and push yourself just that little bit. Take that first step. It's hard, but once you've done the first step, it's easy after that.
So we're running out of time. Sorry, and it's getting really exciting, but I see Expo guys have another question.
Guys, it's Camille from Expo Guys. Just to touch on the linear and circular lifespan of what we do. We as Expo Guys, once we've come across this sustainability drive that was happening maybe 2 years ago, we drove harder into reusing a lot of our stuff. But in looking at it, it's about 75% of what we do is actually has a circular lifespan. It's only 25% that we use in terms of material like chipboard, your MDF, your melamines, which has a linear lifespan, which we then try to change into a circular lifespan by trying to make reuse of this as much as possible before it ends up in a landfill or wherever it goes once it's finished.
Yep.
So, in terms of system and shell scheme per se, is that not already a circular lifespan on those programs?
Sorry, it was Camille, wasn't it?
Yes, coming.
Camille, yeah.
Camille. You're right. Hey, first of all, massive congratulations to getting up to a high number of those materials, because that's tough to do that. The hardest part is that last bit, the last bit of materials. But I'm going to be honest with you, you might never move away from those last 25%, because they're going to be fit for purpose, and they're going to be durable, and they're going to be used in ways of which maybe you're going to have to think about what you do with them at the end of life. Maybe you don't send them to landfill. Can you use them in different ways? Can you use them for packaging? Can you use them for boards, for lining things? Can you donate them to local schools? You know, there's loads of things that you can do with materials at the end of life, instead of just them going to landfill. But Camille, you've done the hard work already. You are living the Sustainability Expo dream right now. Don't beat yourself up about the last bit, because those materials are the really hard ones to get rid of. Because, like Gary said, hey, look, there might be a piece where you have to have some integral structure which has some metal, or it has some MDF, where you have to have that. So try not to beat yourself up. Will you be 100% sustainable materials moving forward? Hey, you can find a wheat board. You can find wheat boards now that replace MDF, but you're still having to use a wheat board instead of an MDF. So it's perception of what you think about the last bit. Praise yourself for what you've done, challenge yourself for what you've got next. But that's going to be a challenge. I can tell you that right now, that last bit.
Mm.
I know we like to
Steve,
say the most sustainable event that's ever happened is one that never happens. So I agree with you, Steve. There may not be that 100%, but you might be able to get it to 99%. And then just to answer to give the expo guys, you know, there's the 4 R's of sustainability, and one of them is repurposing. So exactly to your point, Steve, you know, once the boards or whatever it is that you're using that you feel have now ended their linear or their circular life, let's look and see how you can repurpose that. And as you say, you know, South Africa, we've got a great market that may be able to use it in the local communities
There you
that can
go.
use it in schools and things like that. Gary?
Yeah, charities.
yeah, I just want to say that
Yes.
everyone's on this journey in a different space. Some people are starting out, some people are quite far down the line. People have changed in different ways. They'll refine it in different ways. I think what we need to understand in the biggest perspective is that we're probably only still at a 5 or 10%. If we look at the overall events industry versus what is sustainable and what's not. People like to put a lot of stats in place, but we forget about looking at what is not happening. So if you're looking at materials, circularity versus linear, John said a very important thing, cradle to grave in the beginning versus cradle to cradle. So circularity can end at cradle to grave, but where did that product that's now in a grave site as such, where did it come from? Was it petroleum originally? Is it ever going to decompose, or will it become microfibers? So at that stage, as Steve rightly says, you are refining what you've done up until now. You could be a 75%, you could be a 90%, but I think we all want to be 100%. I'm speaking at this stage as a material supplier, not as a stand builder, which is a sort of a critical part. You know, we see a lot of different people in different spaces. Retail's quite an important aspect of that, where you look at the guys applying materials. Someone does a shop which is rated as the most sustainable shop. When you go and dig down into it, there's a lot of greenwashing going on, and guys can improve more. So I don't think we can indict anyone about not making effort. It's laudable. Again, everyone that's on this is here for a reason. We're here to learn more, to share what we've got. And I think this kind of group of people is what we aspire to. And speaking and having these discussions, whether they be easy discussions or whether they be difficult discussions. You know, I can see people from around the world that we know that implement with Sunita in one day, and they might not do it the next day, purely out of the context in which they're working at that stage. So the shorter answer, I think, is do what you do best, and refine it then as much as you can going forward.
Fantastic, Gary. Thank you. And it's really exciting to see we've got 43 participants still on this call, and we've come to sort of the end of the official time allocation. But 43 out of 75 registrations is actually very, very good. I'm very impressed with that, given the fact that usually nowadays, post-COVID and the post-Zoom and webinar high peak point, we're now peaking again today on this particular call. So it shows you the interest is there from the industry. Now we need to begin to start taking that interest and implementing it into a more sustainable approach. And that's where the EGF is here to help these kind of sessions, to talk about it, get it out in the industry. Let's answer your questions. We are holding regular. We're going to be having another webinar very soon on certification, so that we'll be able to tell you some of the elements that are going to go into certifying sustainable events. So please don't forget to join that one. But I'm going to just ask Steve and Gary to, in 1 minute, to wrap up each one of them, and then we can close this webinar. Over to you, Steve.
First of all, 13, 14 people from Expo Guys in one room on one day. Well done. Hats off to you guys. Big commitment. So well done. Hey, look, guys, all I can say is sustainability it's a journey. It's not a destination. You're never going to get to it. So you're never going to get to a point. You're going to have to continue, okay? And then the final piece for me is sustainability is all about collaboration. You will not be able to do it on your own. So forge the partners, get the people to, like-minded people with you, form those little groups of sustainable groups, but collaboration is the key to sustainable success.
Gary?
Thank you very much, Steve. Last words.
I mean, Steve summed it up. It is a journey. Even where I said, I think I've learned a lot over the past 14 years. I've got no doubt there's a huge amount to learn going forward. I read things every day about new products, new developments, the way people are doing things, something that was maybe seen as sustainable 5 years ago that people look at now and say, it got to a point where the sustainability has been lost because we've scaled it up so far that it's no longer sustainable. And there's a lot of those kind of examples that are around. So again, when you're looking at something and you've reached the point of where you are at, you could see as your best ever, think about how do you scale that to the next step, and can you make it more sustainable when you scale it, or is there a point where you have to say this is at the best that I can, and then start talking to people around you. There's a very small world out there, actually. We've got Steve sitting in the UK, easy to reach out to, easy to learn from.
Yep. Good stuff.
Thank you very much, Steve and Gary. It was really one of the most insightful and thought-provoking discussions we've had in some time. I really want to say thank you guys for taking the time. I think we can all agree that today's conversation has really reminded us that sustainability isn't just about doing less harm. It's about doing things better. It's about rethinking the entire life cycle of what we create from the moment we design it, how it's manufactured, how it's used, how it's reused, and ultimately how it's disposed of. Again, bringing that cradle to grave scenario to implementation. What really did stand out for me today is that the materials discussion is a mindset shift. And as Gary just mentioned, it's about collaborating, transparency, and innovation. And it's encouraging to see how much potential there is when we start asking the right questions and making informed choices. So on behalf of the Event Greening Forum, I want to thank both of our speakers. Once again, Steve Lister, for sharing your global perspective and letting us know that we're not so bad in South Africa, and we're actually in some ways leading the way. And of course, Gary van der Walt, for grounding that right thinking here in South Africa context with practical and local examples. And of course, without you guys online, a big thank you to all of you for joining, engaging, and continuing to be part of this growing movement towards greener and more responsible events. If today's session has inspired you, and I hope it has, please keep the conversation going. Reach out to Gary, reach out to the EGF, reach out to Steve. Look at our websites and social media channels. We are recording this session, so you'll be able to go to our YouTube channel and view it to get so that you can look back on it and share your views and sustainability wins with us, and keep challenging yourselves and your teams to think beyond the booth. Together, we really build a smart, cleaner, and more sustainable events industry for the future. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great rest of the day. And remember, be inspired and stay green, and look out for our next webinar on certification.